The theme for today's show is out with the old, in with the new. Notre Dame is in the new EA Sports college football video game. There's going to be a new broadcasting crew for the Irish home games on NBC this fall, and they finally introduced the new offensive coordinator and linebackers coach. It's coming up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports, and you can watch this episode as well as every other episode on YouTube or listen wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching along, please like the video below by giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the pod, please take a second to rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe on your preferred platform. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Plenty of great stuff to get into today. I've got some thoughts about Notre Dame's participation in the new EA Sports college football video game. I also have some thoughts on NBC's decision to replace Jac Collinsworth as the play-by-play voice for Notre Dame home games. But I want to start with a couple introductions, or I guess reintroductions, I should say, because Notre Dame finally introduced new offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock and linebackers coach Max Bullough last Friday for the first time since they accepted their new roles on the Notre Dame staff. Now, neither of these guys are strangers to Notre Dame. This is Mike Denbrock's third stint as an assistant for the Fighting Irish, and Max Bullough was basically the linebackers coach last season, even though he was listed as the GA, but in his press conference, he even referred to himself as the linebackers coach last season because that's really what he was, but due to NCAA restrictions about full-time coaches on the staff, he had to basically act as the linebackers coach, even though he was only a graduate assistant. And just quick takeaway off the top about Max Bullough, I would not want to meet that dude in the A-gap. Now, I know he played pro football. He had a really great career playing, and even though it's been a few years since he played last, he's a big dude. He's a football guy. He talks like one. He sounds like one. And, I have a good feeling about the future of the Notre Dame linebackers if I'm just basing it completely off his appearance. So I guess that's an encouraging sign. It's not really a surprise that so many people are calling him a rising star in the industry given his demeanor and given his experience. But let's talk about Mike Denbrock because he is certainly the most acclaimed assistant coach coming in. And as I was watching this interview, one thing that jumped out to me pretty quickly, the tone of this press conference was a lot different this time around than it was last year when Notre Dame announced the new offensive coordinator, Gerad Parker. At the time, Marcus Freeman had to go out and speak. He wasn't even participating in this one. And last year, Freeman had to basically act in defense of Jack Swarbrick, the university, and even Gerad Parker to some extent. He was open about the fact that Parker was not his first choice or his second or maybe even his third, but ultimately that's who Freeman chose for the job. And I said it at the time, given everything that had transpired with Notre Dame's offensive coordinator search, Gerad Parker handled that opening press conference as good as you possibly can, which is why I'm hesitant to read too much into any opening press conference because it's pretty easy to win the press conference. It's actually pretty difficult to fail. There's only a few that I can think of that really jump out to me. Nick Sirianni in his opening press conference when he became the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles is one that I don't think anyone will ever forget. Or Adam Gase when he was hired to be the Jets head coach. Those were two really bad opening press conferences. But for the most part, new hire press conferences go pretty well. And I think with Denbrock's history at Notre Dame, his recent success at LSU and at Cincinnati, this was a pretty unique experience compared to other opening press conferences. And there's a couple quick quotes that stuck out to me that I want to go over here. Mike Denbrock was asked why he's at Notre Dame again, and I think everyone saw this one coming, and so did Mike Denbrock because he even said, I knew I was going to be asked this, and I had some time to think about it. But here's his full quote. I felt like I was in a really good place, had a really good job, enjoyed what I was doing, enjoyed living in Louisiana, but it's Notre Dame. I think you guys that have known me forever, it seems like know how much I love this place and what it means to me and how much I've enjoyed my time here. End quote. So even though we all knew that Mike Denbrock really felt strongly about Notre Dame and still appreciated the place, and enjoyed it despite the fact that things ended on a pretty sour note the last time he was around at Notre Dame following the 4-8 season in 2016 when he decided to leave, even though there still would have been a spot for him on the Notre Dame staff. It would have been easy for him to, have some negative feelings about Notre Dame, even though all the people who were there, or at least on the staff, are no longer there. It still would have been easy for him to sort of been like, you know what, I've been there. I don't need to think about it anymore. But clearly the place holds a special place in Denbrock's heart, and that's a big reason why he opted to come back. And there's just so much turnover that happens among assistant coaches at the college level. So it's great to hear that Denbrock is where he wants to be and presumably is going to be there for a long time. We know that his contract is 4 years long, and maybe he'll decide to stay longer. There's also a chance that he doesn't stay, but I still think that the fact that he wants to be at Notre Dame so badly and is so public about his love for the place is really encouraging, because you pair that with the stability that Notre Dame is probably going to have at defensive coordinator now that Al Golden signs his contract extension. They could have two of the best coordinators in the sport together for a long time. And you think about Clemson when they were at their peak. Obviously, they have Dabo Swinney, he's a great head coach, but they also had Tony Ellett and Brent Venables as their coordinators. Tony Ellett as OC and Brent Venables as DC. They were around. They were together for a really long time, and they were at the top of their game. And I think that's a big reason why Clemson had so much sustained success. And ever since those guys have left, things have just not been the same around that program. So when you have two really good coordinators working together and you're building year over year, I think that bodes really well for the future. And that's the case right now for Notre Dame. Now, Denbrock would go on to say, quote, "I have a true belief in Marcus Freeman and his vision and what he believes in. From working with him in the couple years we spent at Cincinnati, watching him and his leadership abilities and the inspiration that he gave to the players that were under his charge was something that was attractive to be a part of." Now, Denbrock is 60 years old. Marcus Freeman just turned 38. Denbrock has been coaching a very long time, and Marcus Freeman has kind of already surpassed him in less than half the time that Denbrock has been in the industry. So you think about it, some coaches might hold a grudge. They might be envious. They might not want to work for a guy that they just worked alongside, and they both have been really successful. Denbrock could have the attitude of, well, maybe I should deserve the head coach. And I'm sure that if Notre Dame offered Mike Denbrock the head coaching job when it was up for grabs after Brian Kelly left, he absolutely would have taken it. We already just talked about how much he likes the university. So I think that it would have been easy for him to have been like, I don't know if I want to work for that guy, but that's not the case. As a matter of fact, it's the complete opposite with Mike Denbrock. He admired the way that Freeman approaches his job, and he chose to work for someone who he used to work alongside instead of one of his closest friends and mentors in the entire industry. I'm not sure if there is a greater testament to Freeman's coaching ability than that. And don't get me wrong, I still have some questions about Marcus Freeman. He's still definitely learning on the job. But when you have coaches who've been around, who have been through a lot at the college level, I'm not just talking about Denbrock, I'm talking about Al Golden as well, for them to commit their futures to Marcus Freeman says a lot. Now, obviously, that very lucrative contract certainly didn't hurt, but I think it's really telling that these guys want to work for Marcus Freeman and they believe in him despite the fact that he's so young and inexperienced as a head coach. I really think that stands out. And the last thing I want to talk about regarding Denbrock's comments at his press conference was about some X's and O's. Now, he didn't dive too much into scheme, but he did say he expects Notre Dame to run a lot more 11 personnel with one running back, one tight end, and three wide receivers than Notre Dame has been running in the past. Now, Notre Dame has been running a lot more 12 and 13 personnel in recent years, which includes two or maybe even three tight ends on the field at the same time, in part because Notre Dame has had a lot of really talented tight ends come through the program in recent years, but also has a lot to do with the deficiencies at wide receiver. But what I love about this is Denbrock said it's actually meant to help the run game, which might surprise some people because you would think if you have more tight ends, more able bodies to block on the line of scrimmage, that's going to be more effective in the run game. But that's not necessarily true. It actually reminded me of a quote Urban Meyer had almost 2 decades ago when the spread offense was first becoming popular, and Urban was considered one of the architects of the spread offense, if not the architect. There was a point in time where Rich Rodriguez and Urban Meyer were the two hottest commodities in the coaching business because of the spread offense. They both kind of had their own styles with it, but it was just an unstoppable force seemingly at the time. And Urban had some really interesting things to say about it. And when the spread was first coming out, it obviously featured a lot more wide receivers on the field, spread out across the field in a high-powered, fast-paced attack. And the ironic thing about the spread was that even though it incorporated more wide receivers on the field, Urban said the primary goal of the spread offense was to run the football. The theory was, spread out the offense, force the defense to defend from sideline to sideline, and then use the entire width of the field to your advantage, because the more space the defense has to cover, the more room it creates for your athletes on offense to make plays. Now, everyone just assumed that all that space was going to be utilized on the outside, but that was not always the case. You could run a lot up the middle, or at least in between the hashes in the run game, because now the defense does not have as many guys in the box. And at that point, it just becomes a numbers game. And then you incorporate a running quarterback who can be really involved in the read option. You can create numerous advantages against the defense when you run the ball. And I feel like that aspect, the intentional goal of the spread offense, has been somewhat lost over the past decade, because football at pretty much every level now is so quarterback-driven and pass-happy. And I'm not even saying that shouldn't be the case. The amount of talent that these quarterbacks have now, you want to push the ball downfield, but I always felt like Notre Dame could stay true to its core of being a run-first team, being a team that has a great offensive line while simultaneously spreading the ball out and getting more athletes on the field. Now, obviously, in order to run this effectively, you need to be able to recruit those athletes. Notre Dame has made progress there, and it sounds like Mike Denbrock agrees with this, and I really cannot wait to see what he can do with the running backs and the wide receivers that Notre Dame has this season. I think at the skill positions, Notre Dame is in a much better place than they've been in years, and that should lead to a lot more success running a more spread-style offense than Notre Dame has ran in a really long time. All right, Notre Dame home games on NBC are going to sound a little different next year. Why NBC had to make this move and what it means for the future of their partnership with the university, coming up next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So last Thursday, Andrew Marchand from The Athletic reported that NBC is replacing Jac Collinsworth as the play-by-play voice for Notre Dame home games. Jason Garrett, the color commentator for the past 2 seasons, is going to return, though, and Collinsworth is going to be replaced by NBC veteran Dan Hicks, who is actually making a return to the booth for Notre Dame home games. Hicks was the play-by-play voice for Notre Dame on NBC from 2013 through 2016, so he's certainly familiar with the role, and he is no stranger to the University of Notre Dame. Hicks is married to Hannah Storm, the longtime SportsCenter anchor for ESPN, and Hannah's got to be one of the most prominent Notre Dame alums that you can find on television outside of the Golics. And I think this is a really great opportunity for Hicks. He is actually probably not going to be on the call for every single Notre Dame home game, though. NBC is going to continue to incorporate Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge, their A crew, basically, into some Notre Dame home games next season. So Eagle and Blackledge were the A crew on NBC last year. They're probably going to spend most of their time on the primetime Big Ten games, but Eagle and Blackledge did call the Notre Dame-Ohio State game last year, and I'm going to be honest with you, I can't tell you how they did on that broadcast because I was at that game, and I still haven't rewatched it. It hurts too much, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be up for it, honestly, because I'm sure I'm going to see the highlights at the end of the game until the end of time, so do I really need to go back and torture myself? I certainly have done that in the past, don't get me wrong, but that one just stings too much. I'm not ready for it, maybe one day. But either way, it sounded like they did a pretty good job in their first season together in the booth, referring to Eagle and Blackledge. So it sounds like whoever Notre Dame has in the booth is going to be pretty solid. Blackledge has been around forever. He was the B-team color guy for ESPN right behind Kirk Herbstreit. Noah Eagle is the son of a broadcasting legend. Dan Hicks has been around forever. So my only complaint is that they didn't replace both the guys in the booth. Like, I understand why they made the move with Jac Collinsworth. I really thought that they would replace Jason Garrett as well, but they're giving Jason Garrett another chance. And let's talk about both those guys for a second, because I'm not surprised that NBC made the decision to move on from Jac Collinsworth. I know that Jac was widely criticized these past 2 seasons, and I'll admit there were times when I participated. I think the only time where I really talked about it extensively on this podcast was after the Notre Dame NBC game. I just felt like their enthusiasm, or maybe the big game voice, to use a cliche, it just didn't live up to the moment that night. And I felt like we were sort of trending to this eventually. The fact that NBC had Eagle and Blackledge on the biggest Notre Dame home game of the year was sort of a sign, in my opinion. And now they decided to make the move. I just never really wanted to single out Jac because I thought it was more about the tandem of him and Garrett. I just didn't think they were a good fit. And this was sort of proven, or at least I guess this sentiment was shared by a lot of other people, because the website Awful Announcing, which is basically a blog about sports media, they do a poll of the 20 best college football broadcast teams every single year. Now, I admit these polls aren't a perfect representation of the public's perception of every broadcast team. Neither is any poll that exists on the internet, but I think it's still a pretty good metric because it generated over 20,000 votes. And after the last season, the duo of Jac Collinsworth and Jason Garrett finished dead last, and the most common grade for them was an F. Yikes. And I know that some people can be a little hyperbolic with this stuff. I don't think they should have been given an F, but it's clear that people who tuned in to Notre Dame home games on NBC were not impressed by Collinsworth and Garrett. As a matter of fact, they were really disappointed. So I felt like NBC had to make a change. You think back to last fall when it was announced that NBC was re-signing as the broadcast outlet for Notre Dame home games through 2029. They were probably going to make a move. And I just felt like there was no way they could go into that deal with a crew that the majority of the Notre Dame fan base did not approve of. That's just not good business, and they decided to make a change. And, I like that they picked Dan. Like I said, I thought they would change both, but as it pertains to Dan, he's been around for a really long time. He understands Notre Dame. I guess my only issue with Dan Hicks is entirely personal. I recognize Dan Hicks' voice from golf broadcasts. He's been a mainstay on PGA Tour events and championships, and he's got a great voice, but when I hear it, I think I should be watching, I don't know, Max Homa on the fairway at Torrey Pines or Tiger in his prime. That's just the first thing that I think of when I hear his voice. So that's something that I'm going to have to get over here again soon. But he did it at Notre Dame for years. I'm sure I can get used to it again. I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to be like the big game voice that Mike Tirico had, but that's an unfair comparison. And that was always my point when Jac Collinsworth was hired to replace Mike Tirico. I was like, this is really unfair for him because Mike Tirico is one of, if not the best play-by-play voices in all of sports. I mean, he is just on another level, and the fact that Jac Collinsworth in his first real gig had to replace a literal legend was certainly going to be a lot. It was going to be really difficult for him to fill those shoes, and I know that there's probably not a ton of people out there who are going to feel sympathy for Jac Collinsworth. I know a lot of people just think he's a Nepo baby and that he probably didn't deserve the role to begin with. I don't feel that way. I like Jac as a person. He lived down the street from me in college. I interviewed him before on my old podcast. He's always been nice to me. I just felt like he wasn't ready for this moment. And in his defense, there's probably only a handful of 28-year-olds in the entire world who could be prepared for that moment, for that kind of call at such a young age. And I think that he's got plenty of talent. He's got to get some more experience. And I think that down the road, Jac Collinsworth is definitely going to bounce back. He's going to have more great opportunities in the future, and I think he's going to take advantage of them. But I'm excited for this new rendition of the broadcast crew going into Notre Dame's new deal with NBC. I think Hicks brings that veteran voice because even though Jason Garrett is a little bit older, he's been a coach for the Cowboys. He was a coach for a long time, so it's not like he's not a veteran when it comes to football. You needed an adult broadcaster in that booth, and I think Hicks brings that, and hopefully Hicks is going to be good enough to bring out the best in Jason Garrett, because even though Jason Garrett is a recognizable name, given the fact that he was the coach for the Cowboys, and that seems like a prerequisite now if you want to be a big-time commentator. If you want to get a big contract, you have to have some affiliation with the Cowboys. Just ask Tony Romo. I think that's a major reason why he was ever in the booth in the first place. So I get that aspect. I understand why NBC would give him a shot. Now they're essentially giving him a second shot because they're ready to make changes to the booth, but they didn't make it with him. So we're going to see how it goes. I'm going to be optimistic about this because I have belief in Dan Hicks, and I think that NBC, what they're doing now, that they have a lot more college football on their plate, they're investing a lot more in the sport, and I think that long-term it's going to be a positive for them and also for Notre Dame because even though I think a lot of us want Brady Quinn to eventually assume the role as color commentator, I don't know if we're ever going to see that, and I still think that there's a great opportunity for these guys come this fall. All right, coming up next, we finally found out that Notre Dame is going to participate in the upcoming EA Sports college football video game, and I think this will have long-term effects that you might not have considered. One more bit of exciting news from last week. Athletic Director Jac Collinsworth confirmed that Notre Dame will be in the next iteration of the EA Sports college football video game. If you remember, back in 2021, Jack said that Notre Dame would not participate in the game unless the players were able to profit from name, image, and likeness. At the time, NIL was not legal. It was certainly talked about a lot. We all knew that that's certainly where things were trending, and it felt like a great opportunity for Jack and Father Jenkins and the leaders of Notre Dame to sort of jump out and show their support of the true meaning of name, image, and likeness because they believe the players in the game should be able to profit from that and be paid for their name, image, and likeness in the true meaning of the word. But even though times have changed and NIL has been legal now for a couple of years, Notre Dame had not publicly confirmed that they would be in the game despite the fact that a lot of other schools had done so already. That all changed last week, and we got an official announcement from Jac Collinsworth. Quote, "After nearly 2 years of work with EA Sports, we're proud to announce that our fans around the world will be able to play as the Fighting Irish in the upcoming college football franchise. The work that EA Sports is doing to provide over 11,000 college student-athletes opportunities to benefit directly from their name, image, and likeness is a first-of-its-kind undertaking. We are proud to have involved in the success." End quote. So if you're like me and you played this game religiously when you were younger, this is terrific news. Right? I used to play it so much. Like, it was honestly probably over the top. It was my favorite game in the world, and I loved playing as Notre Dame. And I'd also do, like, Road to Glories where I'd do the traditional thing where you go to a terrible school and you try to win a championship at, like, Yale or something like that. That was always a fun part of the game. But, of course, I liked playing as Notre Dame as well, right? I'd always get super into it. I'd do the dynasty, and then I'd win a national championship with Notre Dame. And so far, that's the closest Notre Dame has come to winning a national championship in my life. But I think that this is a little bit more important than just us fans getting to play the game that we all know and love, right? I think it's great for fans of Notre Dame and college football to be able to play with or against Notre Dame because you don't have a college football game without Notre Dame. You also have to consider what the backlash would have been like if Notre Dame had decided not to join. Can you imagine how the college football would have reacted if Notre Dame didn't join? Like, just think about this. The college football world is never unified on anything ever. Like, seriously, they're never all aligned, but seemingly everyone is stoked about this new game, and everyone is excited for it to come out. And can you imagine the eye rolls if Notre Dame said, you know what, we're not going to join? Like, it would not have been good for the perception of the program and the school and the university. It would have felt even more elitist than some of the things that Notre Dame does already. And it just would have been awful. Like, I think even the most devout Notre Dame fans and defenders would have been pretty annoyed if Notre Dame just decided to not join the video game for whatever reason. So we don't have to worry about that. But I think there's another element to this, and, it might seem like a reach, but I think it's legitimate. Notre Dame needs to continue growing its fan base, particularly among young people. They need to reach a younger audience, and this is a great way to help that. Like, I don't know about you, but a lot of us were born into Notre Dame fandom. Like, I know I was. I never really had a choice. My dad was a Notre Dame fan, even though he didn't go to the school. And he grew up a Notre Dame fan. His brother was a Notre Dame fan, and my grandpa was a Notre Dame fan too, so it was passed down. They were the one team that was on TV, Irish Catholic family, all that, right? Like, it made perfect sense for me to be born into Notre Dame fandom. But there's a lot of people out there who they weren't born with the team. Now, sometimes they choose the local team, but a lot of times they choose whatever team is the most fun to root for, especially impressionable children. And I feel like a lot of those kids who are growing up during the past decade, during this new generation, I feel like the vast majority of those kids, if they don't have a team, they're going to latch on to Bama. They're going to latch on to Georgia or Ohio State, or I can't even believe I'm saying this, but maybe even Michigan now. And given the lack of on-field success for Notre Dame, or at least at the highest levels of the sport, Notre Dame has certainly won a lot of games, but they have not really won that many meaningful games. I feel like Notre Dame is missing out on a lot of new young fans that they basically had all of them back in the day. And I'm not saying that like because they're going to be in this new NCAA, or I guess I shouldn't say NCAA, just because they're going to be in this new college football video game doesn't mean that every young person who plays it is all of a sudden going to start cheering for Notre Dame. But I just think that when the great things about Notre Dame, when they're all going to be a part of this game, they're going to be displayed, and I know that they're going to incorporate some of the traditions and stuff like that. That's great, and I think it provides an opportunity for more young people to become fans of Notre Dame, or at least familiarize themselves with Notre Dame and some of the history and the lore, because even though us fans all know about it, we've heard about it throughout our entire lives, most people, especially young people, don't know that. And I think this could be a great way for them to learn and appreciate the school a little bit more. Like, video games have always been a promotional tool, but especially for sports games. And there's no doubt this game is a promotional tool for college football at large. But it also is for every single team and player who chooses to be involved. I know that Riley Leonard already announced that he's going to be in the game. I would imagine the vast majority of Notre Dame's players are going to also be in the game because, yes, they get a little bit of money. It's not a lot, but they also get the game for free. And I know that those guys are going to want to play it as well. So I'm not saying like the brand is dying or anything like that, but, you know, you could always use a little bit of a boost. And I think that this could potentially provide that for Notre Dame's. It's not going to change things overnight. But I think it's another step in the right direction as Notre Dame tries to reach a younger audience. And yeah, man, I'm absolutely thrilled for this game to come out. I'm probably going to have to tell all of my close friends and loved ones to just, you know, don't talk to me for like a week or maybe two once this game comes out, because I'm going to be locked in. I'm going to be playing this game a lot. And I guess the only time I'll take a break is to do this podcast, but it's going to be a lot. I really cannot wait for this game to come out. All right, that's it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I want to give a quick birthday shout out to my dad. It is his birthday today. He has the pleasure of spending his birthday by moving into a new house. Personally, I can't think of a worse way to spend a birthday than moving, but here you go, Dad. I hope this one isn't too miserable. As for me, I will be back right here every morning the rest of the week, so make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Give us a follow on social media. The X account is @LockedOnIrish. Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod, and my personal X account is @Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.